Chapter 7. Little Rabbit. As they separated, the weight of the city pressed in. The crowd carried each of them away like leaves cast on a river's current. Izzi let herself drift southward, boots clicking on cobbled stone, following scents that grew stronger the deeper she wove into the city's belly. Spices, smoke, perfume, thick and cloying, mingling with laughter that always seemed too sharp. She knew these smells. They clung like memories, unwelcome yet familiar. The streets narrowed, lanterns painted red swaying above doorways, silk curtains fluttering in windows. Music spilled from taverns where shadows danced in lamplight. Voices, husky, beckoning, called from doorways, promising warmth, company, escape. Izzi's pace slowed. Her fingers brushed the hilt of her dagger, not out of fear, but instinct. This place wasn't a threat, it was a mirror, and it reminded her of everything she had clawed free from. Still, her violet-gray eyes gleamed as she smiled to herself, fox-like. If there was information to be found in this city, she would find it here, among wolves dressed in silk and shadows perfumed with roses. Even in the height of day, the district was alive. Crowds pressed shoulder to shoulder, laughter spilling from doorways, dice clattering on tabletops dragged out into the street. Bright silks fluttered from balconies overhead, some patterned with painted roses, others stitched with gold thread that caught the sun. The air was thick with incense, sweat, and perfume. Scents layered so heavily that they clung to her skin with every step. Izzi wove through the chaos with practiced ease, her violet-gray eyes drifting from one pocket of life to another. She caught sight of women leaning in door frames, drawing men closer with nothing more than a smile, and merchants hawking cheap jewelry made to look expensive. A group of masked performers danced to the tune of a violin, their motions sharp, alluring, their painted faces twisted into false joy. She smirked faintly. Even here, in daylight, the game never stopped. This district never slept, why would it? Coin never tired. Desire never dulled. Crowded even now. Izzi thought, tugging at the braid in her chestnut hair absently as her gaze swept the busy lane. All these people, spilling secrets without even realizing. And every one of them thinks they're the clever one. Just like me, once. The thought sat bitter in her chest. She adjusted the silver cuff on her pointed ear, exhaling slowly. Her mind sharpened. If she wanted information, real information, she'd have to choose wisely where to dig. Brothels had ears sharper than daggers, and their keepers often knew more than priests. Taverns were useful too, drunk tongues wagged easily, but sifting through lies took patience. And then there were guild houses, mercenaries, hunters, smugglers, men and women who traded in blood and whispers as much as steel. Izzi let her gaze drift to a sign swinging on rusted chains farther down the street, a carved wolf's head, scarred and weathered, marking the door of the local hunters' guild. Her smile tugged sharper, fox-like. Best place for teeth, she muttered to herself. The brothel was impossible to miss. Painted shutters were thrown open to let in the noon sun, silk curtains swaying in the warm breeze. Women leaned against the frames, draped in gauzy robes that revealed more than they concealed, their laughter carrying out into the street like music crafted to snare. Izzi slowed as she passed. A tall, dark-haired beauty caught her gaze and winked, curling a finger to beckon her closer. Another, with golden hair spilling over bare shoulders, blew a kiss, her lips stained deep crimson. A pair pressed together behind them, whispering in each other's ears before breaking into a teasing giggle at Izzi's expense. She couldn't help it, her lips curved into a smile. Not one of invitation, not truly. A smile with a weight beneath it, a shadow pressed into its edges. Maybe another time, she thought. Business first. The words whispered in her own head, not quite spoken, and with them came that familiar pang, half yearning, half ache. She shifted her cloak tighter around her shoulders and moved on, though the music of laughter lingered behind her like perfume. Further down, the scent of sizzling spices and roasting meat pulled her forward. A street vendor stood behind a cart piled high with skewered lamb and flatbread blistered on the coals. Izzi's stomach gave an unbidden growl, and she smirked faintly at herself. "A coin for the hungry lady?" the vendor asked, lifting a skewer with practiced flourish. Izzi flicked him a copper piece and caught the food mid-air as he tossed it, biting into the tender meat. The juices hit her tongue with a burst of salt and smoke, grounding her in the moment. She ate standing there, eyes roaming the chaos around her, the dice games, the drunken men stumbling even at midday, the children darting between carts with quick hands and quicker feet, all of it pressed down on her with that strange blend of familiarity and unease. This was her kind of place. Loud, dirty, alive. And yet, as the flavors faded and she wiped her hands on her cloak, she realized it wasn't comfort she felt. Not really. Her gaze drifted again, and there it was. The wolf's head sign swinging gently in the breeze, scarred wood catching the light. The Hunters Guild. A place that dealt in coin, blood, and whispers. A place where answers waited if one knew how to ask. Izzi adjusted her braid over her shoulder, straightened her back, and started toward the door. The heavy oak door groaned as Izzi pushed it open. Heat hit her first. Pipe smoke, the tang of sweat, the sour bite of spilled ale soaked into the planks. The Hunters Guild wasn't just a hall, it was a den, raw and restless. A tavern had been built into one side, and every table was packed. Plates clattered, mugs slammed against wood, and the laughter that rose wasn't merry. It was sharp-edged, the kind that could cut flesh if given the chance. Dozens of heads turned when she stepped inside. The din faltered, voices tapering off into the hiss of suspicion and curiosity. Men with scarred jaws leaned back in their chairs, studying her with narrowed eyes. Women with knives strapped across their thighs looked her up and down with cool appraisal. And somewhere at the back, a huge, bald brute with a broken nose muttered something low, sending a ripple of snickers through his table. Izzi felt their gazes slide over her, like hands searching for weak seams in armor, sizing me up, measuring if I'm prey or poison. She let a smile curve her lips, loose and easy, playing at warmth even as her fingers brushed the hilt of the dagger at her hip. "Well," she said lightly, voice carrying just enough to be heard, "seems I walked into the wrong place." One man near the front, broad-shouldered, with teeth yellowed from chewing barkweed, leaned forward, elbow on the table. His eyes crawled over her figure, lingering with all the grace of grease sliding down glass. "What's a pretty little thing like you doing in a dirty place like this?" The room hummed, waiting for her answer. Izzi tilted her head, a smile widening though it never reached her eyes. She let her gaze sweep lazily over the tables, as though the weight of their stares amused her more than it threatened. "This is cozy. Half the room looks like they'd sell me, the other half like they'd buy me." A ripple of laughter, too sharp, too eager, went through the tables. But the elf didn't flinch, her hand brushing the hilt of her dagger like it was just part of the conversation. "Don't worry," she went on, voice low and honeyed. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Unless someone asks nicely." That earned a heavier silence, the kind that prickled in the air, balanced somewhere between menace and interest. The guild wasn't charmed, the laughter that followed her last words was jagged, more hostile than amused. One of them, a brute of a man with a shaven head and shoulders like a blacksmith's anvil, scraped his chair back and stood. He towered over Izzi, his shadow swallowing her in the smoky light. He leaned down close, his breath thick with ale and meat, his words meant to strip her down to nothing. "Elf like you doesn't belong here. Soft skin, pretty smile. You're nothing but a coin purse waiting to be spent. I'm gonna fucking eat you alive, little rabbit, and give whatever is left to the table." For once, Izzi's smile didn't hold. It slipped away, slow, deliberate, like a mask lowering. Her violet gray eyes flattened into something cold, unreadable. The tavern's noise thinned, men shifting in their chairs as they noticed the change. The brute didn't just leer, he reached out. A meaty hand, scarred and calloused, brushed along her hip as if he owned the right. Her hand moved quicker than the eye, snapping to his wrist and twisting hard. The man yelped as his knees buckled, and in the same motion, she shoved her shoulder into his chest. He hit the floorboards with a resounding crack, sprawled flat on his back, gasping for air as the guild erupted in a roar of laughter and jeers at his expense. Izzi loomed over him, expression cold and unreadable, her violet gray eyes as sharp as blades. She didn't need words, her silence was punishment enough. The man rolled onto his side, muttering curses, clutching his wrist. The others, however, were satisfied. To them she had proved herself. Not just pretty, not just sharp-tongued, but dangerous. But one hunter at the back, a wiry fellow with sharp eyes, saw what the others didn't, saw how her shoulders had tensed, how her fingers twitched at her side like they were aching to draw blood. He saw how close she'd been to turning the room into a slaughterhouse. Izzi didn't smile. The guild hall slowly returned to its usual chaos, dice clattering on tables, mugs slamming, laughter rising like smoke. But her face stayed carved from stone. She turned on her heel, boots striking the floor with deliberate calm, and walked toward the bounty board. The laughter and talk returned around her, but in her chest there was only silence, a hollow space where her smile had once been. Cold, collected, unforgiving. Her eyes scanned the parchment slips nailed to the board, the words blurring as a whisper slid through her head. Why stop now? She froze, fingers hovering over the curling edge of a bounty note. You could end them all right here. No one would mourn them. It would be easy. Gods, it would be fun. Her jaw tightened. She didn't need to turn to know whose voice it was. It curled like smoke through her mind, familiar, mocking, seductive. Izzi's hand flexed against the hilt of her dagger. For half a heartbeat, she almost believed it was her own thought. Then she turned, and there she was. Selene leaned in the doorway, not dressed for a hunt, but for the district just outside, silks that clung to her like water, a slit that bared a long leg, jewelry catching the light of the hearth. The hunters had missed her entrance completely, but Izzi saw her as if the whole room had gone silent again. That smirk, that same dangerous curve of lips. Selene lifted a brow, eyes glittering, as though she'd read every dark flicker Izzi had just swallowed down. Izzy's chest tightened, a sharp pang beneath her breastbone that spread like cracks through glass. Her lungs pulled in air, but it felt thin, useless, like breathing through cloth. The tavern noise faded to a muffled hum, like she was underwater. Selene hadn't spoken a word. She didn't need to. The curve of her smirk, the way her silks shimmered in the firelight, the easy tilt of her body against the frame, it was all enough to ignite sparks in Izzy's chest. Sparks that weren't fire, but memory. You could end them all, no one would mourn them, it would be fun. I'll fucking eat you alive, little rabbit. It would be easy. The words painted themselves across the walls of her skull, unbidden, as though Selene had reached in and branded them there years ago. Izzy blinked, but every time her eyes found Selene's, another flicker of memory surged. Silk sheets tangled at their waists, the sharp taste of wine on Selene's lips, laughter that turned cruel in a heartbeat. Her throat tightened. She grabbed her chest as if to hold her heart still, palm pressed hard against the racing beat. It was too much. The scent of perfume she remembered, the shimmer of those gems, the fire in Selene's gaze that always promised ruin. Izzy stumbled back, the room narrowing, the warmth of the guild hall twisting into a suffocating closeness. The walls pressed in, the laughter of hunters rang harsh in her ears. She turned sharply and pushed through the crooked hall behind the bar, boots striking too loud, too fast. The uneven timbers and dim lantern light gave her cover to flee, breath ragged, hands still clutching her chest. Up the stairs two at a time, the air cooler, thinner but no less heavy. She didn't look back. She didn't dare. Celine's smirk stayed etched in her mind's eye, burning there as if she'd carved it into her very soul. The room upstairs was small, meant for travelers who only needed a bed and four walls, but to Izzy it might as well have been a cage. She slammed the door shut with her back, slid down the frame until she hit the floorboards hard, and curled forward with both arms wrapped around her chest. Her breath came ragged, sharp pulls of air that hissed through clenched teeth. Saliva slipped from the corner of her mouth, warm against her chin, unnoticed. Her chest tightened like a fist was closing around her heart. Eat you alive, little rabbit. It would be fun. End them all. The words pressed against her skull in Celine's voice, more vivid than memory, sharper than thought. They drummed inside her, louder than her pulse. She pressed her palm hard against her sternum, as if she could hold herself together, her other hand clawing at the floor. "Get it together," she whispered hoarsely, the words cracking out of her throat. "Get it together, damn you!" Her dagger scraped free of its sheath, a whisper of steel. She gripped the hilt tight enough for her knuckles to whiten, then laid the blade across her open left palm. The metal was cool, steady, real. With a sharp intake of breath, she squeezed. Pain. The edge bit into her flesh just enough to bloom fire across her nerves. Her breath hitched, her body jerking as crimson welled in a thin line across her palm. She tightened her grip on the blade, not to bleed, but to anchor. Every spike of pain drew her back from the storm inside her head. It hurt, but it was hers. Hers to control, hers to endure. Her chest heaved, her teeth bared, tears stinging at the edges of her eyes but never falling. The words still rattled in her skull, Celine's voice circling like a hawk overhead. Then, a knock. Soft, deliberate. Her head snapped toward the door, eyes wide. The wood creaked slowly as it opened, a thin line of hallway light spilling across the floorboards. And there she was, Selene, leaning casually against the frame, clad in silks more suited for sex than a hunt, her body haloed in the glow from the hall. The face she wore was light, almost playful, but her eyes carried the glimmer of a predator who'd already chosen her prey. Her presence filled the small room like smoke. She didn't need to speak. Izzy heard her anyway. The old words, the ones that haunted, the ones that seduced and taunted, painted themselves fresh across her mind's eye. Her chest heaved again, the dagger trembled in her grip, blood trickling across her fingers. Selene tilted her head, as if amused by the sight of Izzy collapsed, broken open, yet still gripping steel like it was her lifeline. The silence stretched thin, heavy, unbearable. And then, Selene stepped further inside, shutting the door with a click that seemed to echo forever. Selene let the silence stretch, her smirk sharpening as her eyes traveled over Izzy's trembling hand and the dagger still pressed in her own palm. She stepped closer, her perfume amber and smoke curling into the air between them. "Well?" Selene murmured at last, her voice velvet wrapped around barbs. "Still playing the part of the cornered wolf, are you? But look at you now, eyes wide, chest heaving. A blade you can barely hold steady. Almost cute, Izzi. Almost. Izzi said nothing. She clenched her jaw, swallowing down the tremor in her chest, forcing her eyes to narrow, to focus. Selene's words slid like oil. Did you miss me? The nights we shared? The way you begged me to slow down, and then begged me not to stop? She tilted her head, black hair spilling like ink over one shoulder, her lips curling with cruel delight. I can still hear it. Izzi's silence was a shield, thin but steady. She pulled her breath in slow, steadying the storm clawing inside her. The trembling in her hand eased, though her dagger still shivered faintly in her grip. Selene's smirk twitched wider. Ah, there's the stare. Cold, sharp. The Izzi I know. The Izzi who made me bleed, and liked it. Before Izzi could respond, Selene's hand shot out, fingers knotting in her hair, yanking her head back hard. Izzi's breath tore out of her throat as her chin snapped upward, throat bared. Selene's other hand slithered down, smooth as silk, wrapping over Izzi's dagger hand, guiding it upward, up, until the steel kissed the hollow of Izzi's throat. The blade pressed just enough to remind her how fragile skin could be. Izzi's lips parted, the words rough but steady. I thought you wanted me alive, she hissed through her teeth. To find your artifact, since you're not clever enough to find it yourself. The smirk never left Selene's face, though her eyes glittered, sharp and wild. She leaned close, her breath brushing Izzi's lips. Oh, I do, Selene purred, the dagger pressing firmer for half a heartbeat before she slackened her grip. But what's the fun in waiting patiently? Her teeth glinted as she whispered, low and intimate. Until then, I just want to have a little fun. Selene's grin widened, sharp as broken glass, as if Izzi's defiance only amused her more. She leaned in, the heat of her body seeping into the air, the faint hum of fire licking at her skin as if embers lived beneath her flesh. Then, without warning, Selene's lips crushed against Izzi's. Izzi froze, eyes wide, cheeks burning scarlet, her breath caught in her throat, her dagger slipping from her grip as Selene's tongue pushed past her parted lips, tasting her, claiming her. Izzi's mind reeled, panic and heat colliding in a dizzying rush. She wanted to push her away, she wanted to claw free, but she couldn't move, because as Selene's kiss deepened, another sensation wound its way through her. Whispers, fleeting, half-formed thoughts not her own. Memories stirred loose. Kaylin's warnings, Renlin's nervous laughter, the cold rune pressed into her palm the day they left the forest, the words etched on the parchment, where the water remembers the moon. Selene's gift bled into her through the kiss, slipping past her defenses like smoke, rifling through her mind. She sifted through Izzi's experiences, tugging at threads, pulling at secrets, seeing not just what Izzi had done but what she had felt, her exile, her scars, the budding bond with the scribe, the faint ache of loneliness she buried beneath wit and bravado. Izzi's heart slammed against her ribs. She thought it was the kiss, the stolen intimacy, the taste of Selene's tongue sliding against hers. But it was more. Something invasive, something stripping her bare. And she couldn't stop it. When Selene finally pulled back, a strand of saliva stretched between them, catching the dim light of the crooked chamber before it broke and fell against Izzi's chin. Her dagger clattered to the floor as Selene released her hair, stepping back with deliberate slowness, triumphant and radiant. Her lips glistened, and her smirk was that of a conqueror. She purred, voice husky with satisfaction. Even better than I remembered. She licked the corner of her mouth, eyes glittering with dangerous delight. You hide so many delicious things in that head of yours, little rabbit. Izzi, cheeks aflame and chest heaving, clutched at herself, shame and rage twisting into knots. She didn't understand what Selene had done, but she felt violated, undone. Selene turned on her heel, hips swaying, every step dripping confidence. She didn't need to say it aloud. Izzi knew. Selene had taken something. Selene lingered in the doorway, her shadow cutting sharp lines across the dim floorboards. Her lips curved into that infuriating smirk as she turned her head back, eyes burning with cruel amusement. You always did try so hard to play strong, she said softly, but the venom in her words carried like a blade. But I've seen what you keep buried. You wear that charm like armor, but beneath it, broken glass. And Kaylin. She let out a laugh, low and mocking. You think Kaylin can keep you steady? He's drowning in his own ghosts. He can't save you. He never could. Izzi's lips parted, a protest caught in her throat, but Selene pressed on, circling her like a predator savoring the tremble in its prey. And the boy. your darling little scribe." Selene's laugh was soft, almost pitying. "He sees only what you let him see, that bright, glittering mask you wear. But the truth, if he ever glimpsed the real you, the hunger, the blood, the ruin, you think he'd still sit so close? Still look at you with those wide, innocent eyes?" "No." She leaned in, her breath hot against Izzi's ear. "He'd run screaming. He'd never love you, not truly. That's why you'll always be alone, little rabbit." "Little rabbit," Selene purred. "Because no matter how far you run, no matter who you cling to, only I know what you truly are. And I'm not afraid of it." She straightened then, firelight curling at her fingertips, casting her face in a glow that was equal parts divine and damnable. Her smile softened again, just enough to be cruel. "I'll even love you for it." The words lingered in the air, poisonous and sweet. Selene turned away, the sway of her hips mocking again, haunted by that whisper, echoing through her skull. "I'll even love you." Then Selene turned back, slowly, deliberately. Her eyes glowed like banked embers, cruel delight shimmering in them as though she'd known Izzi's every thought, every tremor of doubt. Izzi lay sprawled on the floorboards, her chest heaving, her fingers tightening around the dagger though her arms trembled. Her throat burned with words she wanted to hurl, words that would cut sharper than steel, yet what slipped out was broken, stammering, barely carrying weight. You think I'd ever?" Her voice cracked, defiance swallowed up by the shudder in her chest. The attempt at a jab fell flat, crumbling before Selene's amused stare. Selene chuckled, low and rich, as though the failure had been the answer she wanted all along. She bent at the waist, her hair spilling forward like liquid fire, and extended her hand, palm up, patient, a serpent offering salvation. "Come with me," she said softly, almost tenderly. "Leave the boy. Leave the orc. They'll never understand you, not the way I do. With me, you'll stop pretending, stop clawing for scraps of acceptance. You'll be who you were meant to be. Dangerous, beautiful, untethered." The words dug under Izzi's skin like hooks. Her breath quickened, panic and temptation coiling in her gut. Slowly, shakily, she raised her hand toward Selene's, her eyes flashing with something desperate, hope maybe, or fury. She took her hand but suddenly pulled her, lunging, trying to drive her dagger home. Steel rang, pain lanced through her wrist, the blade slipped away. Selene was already behind her, impossibly fast, her movements almost playful. Izzi gasped as Selene's arms coiled around her waist, pulling her upright in a bruising embrace. Her tongue darted out, licking across Izzi's ear with a mocking hum. "You think you're clever," Selene whispered, hot breath searing her skin. The dagger clattered uselessly across the floor. "But I can have you any time I please, little rabbit." Izzi froze as Selene's fingers slid down, catching the hem of her tunic. With one swift hug of steel, the fabric split. Cold air kissed her skin. Vulnerability washed over her, raw and unshielded. Selene stepped back, just far enough to stand above her, drinking in the sight. Her smirk curved, slow and cruel, eyes burning with hunger and triumph both. "One last look," she murmured, voice thick with dark satisfaction. "Don't forget who holds you, even when I'm gone." And then, as if the air itself swallowed her, Selene was gone, slipping into the dark, leaving nothing but the echo of her touch, the chill of exposed skin, and the venom of her words twisting through Izzi's chest. Izzi stayed there on the wooden floor long after Selene's presence dissolved into shadow. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the uneven drag of her breath. She curled inward, pulling her knees close, her chest still bare where the torn fabric clung uselessly. Her fingers traced the gouge in the wood where her dagger had slipped, and for a long time she stared at it, empty-eyed, her thoughts a storm of shame, anger, and the faintest ember of longing she hated herself for. Time slipped by unnoticed. Eventually, her breathing steadied, though the weight on her ribs never left. She pushed herself up, palms flat against the floor, limbs trembling but obedient. She scavenged the room, a chest half falling apart yielded nothing but moth-eaten rags. The wardrobe's bottom drawer coughed up an undershirt, too tight and coarse but intact. Izzi pulled it over her head, grimacing at the fit, the rough fabric biting against her skin. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Her steps were sluggish at first, but resolve crept back with each one as she descended into the noise of the district. Lanterns were being lit, bathing the streets in orange glow, the smell of roasted meats and smoke wafting thick. She kept her head down until a splash of silk caught her eye, an opening still lit, a silk merchant's narrow shop squeezed between a jeweler and a perfumed parlor. Inside, she trailed her fingers over bolts of fabric, the smoothness soothing after the coarse shirt. She had little left, a few coins clinking pitifully in her palm, but enough. She chose a tunic the color of deep wine, soft and flowing. Handing over her last copper, she changed quickly behind a hanging curtain, exhaling when the fabric draped against her like an armor made of elegance. It wasn't the best she had ever worn, but it gave her back a piece of herself Selene had stolen. Outside, the night was alive. Izzi paused in the street, cheeks tingling with heat that wasn't entirely from shame. She slapped her face twice, hard enough to sting, forcing the fog away. Then came the smile, crafted, sharp, and familiar. The smile that said she was untouchable, the smile that had carried her through taverns, battlefields, and betrayals alike. By the time she turned down the street that led toward the inn, she was Izzi again, charming, witty, dangerous, and no one would ever know how close she had come to breaking.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. More chapters are on the way.